We've got an interesting new wrinkle in the Donald Trump Jr. Trump Tower meeting story today, which is for some reason not getting a lot of coverage that I saw. And it has to do with Russian lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya's recently saying that at that meeting, Don Trump Jr. hinted that he might be willing to push to change a major sanctions law targeting Russian oligarchs in exchange for damaging information about Hillary Clinton, which is significant. I mean, this getting rid of the Magnitsky Act, as we know, is one of the main policy goals that Vladimir Putin and his regime have in the United States. We know that at the meeting, that was one of the reasons that they sought out the meeting, was to talk about that issue, about adoptions, as if they care about the adoptions. And apparently, if she is to be believed, that is what they discussed. What she said, he said was, looking ahead, if we come to power, we can return to this issue and think what to do about it. I understand our side may have messed up, talking about passing it in the first place, but it'll take a long time to get to the bottom of it. So he's being coy. He's apparently as good of a negotiator as his father. Veselnitskaya also said Trump Jr. requested financial documents showing that money that allegedly evaded US taxes had gone to Clinton's campaign. She didn't have any and described the 20-minute meeting as a failure. She didn't have them, but after the last week, I don't doubt that they exist. Anyway, so if you don't remember this initial story, the meeting took place after British publicist Rob Goldstone contacted Trump Jr. on behalf of Veselnitskaya to request it, describing her as a Russian government lawyer who had information and documents that would incriminate Clinton. This is Goldstone. This is obviously very high level and sensitive information, but it's part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, to which the president's son replied, if it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer. And so he was fully aware of what the objective of that meeting was. They go, she says, we have this documentation. I don't have it right here, I can't give it to you. And here's what we want. And he says, maybe we can get that overturned if we get to power. I mean, I would say that the email by itself was glossed over, but with that, I don't know, there should be a term for that. Like if there's like foreign government and like you're like gonna give them stuff and then they give you stuff. Like, especially with how much it's been in the news, could we have a term? Come on, America, we got like 50,000 words in this language. We can't come up with something.
Maybe quid pro quo would do it, or tit for
something
tat.
like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of Latin. Let's get something shorter, but that's a good starting point. We can do that. And then bear in mind again, this was glossed over when he says, if it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer. It wasn't like, and then the summer rolled around and we all got a nice tan. The summer rolled around and tons of damaging information about Hillary Clinton got released. Weird that that happened on the schedule the president's son requested. So look, it's entirely possible at this point that Veselnitskaya is misremembering or purposefully lying. I have no reason to believe anything that she says about this, but it is interesting to note that whereas previously when she had come out and talked about the meeting, Donald Trump Jr.'s lawyer was quick to say that she was inaccurate or lying or whatever, but they're oddly quiet today. It's not like he didn't see this and they're not talking about it. That is odd. I think that's worthy of talking about.
I mean, it's not just drawn out of the universe, out of the ether either. I mean, we know that the meeting happened, right? And now she's giving you a quote from that meeting. And as John says, I mean, it may not be right. That was the first thing I thought of too. Well, we try to be fair to these people who, won't cut a break to anybody, but you still try to be fair to the facts. And of course, the facts are nobody's under oath here. We don't have any sort of independent corroboration of his comments, but his comments are consistent with what happened. And they seem as though they'd be consistent with the general ethic in the campaign and in the run up to the general election.
Yeah, and look, I mean, again, we can't simply assume that she's speaking accurately. I mean, if the idea is that Russia's doing all of this, in the election and outside of the election, having to do social movements and all that to disrupt America, at this point, lying about this in particular would probably advance that objective. In fact, if there had been no collusion, it's in Russia's interest to make us think that there was, because that would be disruptive. Man, we're in fucked up times. But that's where we're at, and we're trying to make the most of it. So she's saying, I was there by myself, but as they're pointing out, she's using talking points that have been shared with one of Vladimir Putin's legal hitmen, effectively. This is a metaphoric hitman, not like his real hitmen that kill journalists and opposition figures. For some reason, we gloss over that. But then you have to think, okay, so the Magnitsky Act, it hasn't actually been taken away. So, I mean, is he really giving what he said he would? It doesn't look like it. Okay, well, let's talk about sanctions then. We know that they passed a new round of sanctions on not just Russia, but on oligarchs in Russia, and those haven't gone into effect. Why is that? Because Donald Trump refuses to put them into effect. Weird. It seems consistent with wanting to provide some sort of payback to people who might have helped you.
Right.
Or if not, he's willing to do something extremely suspicious that would lead us to believe he's paying them back. And for what reason? No one can come up with any other reason he would be acting the way he is other than that he is paying someone back.
Yeah, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I mean, it does look as though Donald Trump and his administration are extending themselves majorly to the Russians, and that's taking the form of not enforcing the sanctions, which is remarkable to me. I mean, to me, that's about as naked. Even if this isn't legit, you'd think you wouldn't want to create the impression that you have a relationship with Russia that's too cozy. But
yeah, it was passed by Republicans.
This is the most naked example of there being some kind of, and then as we'll get to, there are relationships, as it turns out, within his administration and the Russians.
If you like this video, you probably like independent media. The best way to support independent media, become a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.